The chamber was colder than Kaelira had expected, not just in temperature, that was easy enough to brace against, but in spirit. The stone walls, dark and towering, stretched impossibly high, swallowing the flicker of torchlight that lined the cold floor. The echoes of her footsteps had faded, long before she reached the center, where all eyes now bore down on her, like wolves scenting prey. Her breath was steady, lungs calm, despite the thundering storm behind her ribcage. Her arms hung locked, but not trembling, at her sides. Each breath, each measured heartbeat, was an act of defiance, a quiet declaration that she would not break here. Kaelira's ice-grey eyes scanned the twisted faces gathered for judgment. The council was a predatory swarm, lips tightly pressed over malicious questions, shoulders tensed with suspicion, but none met her stare. Their treason charge was a chain forged from lies. Betrayal, yes, but not hers. Yet, the accusation clung to her like winter frost, ruthless and relentless. At the room's apex, where others would find comfort in height or position, sat the Alpha King, Theron. Tall, broad-shouldered, carved with the authority that sent tremors rippling through his pack and the court alike. His raven-black hair was peppered with silver strands, like the frost on mountain peaks at dawn. His deep amber eyes, glowing faintly, as if lit from within by some unquenchable fire, fixed on Kaelira with an intensity that neither yielded nor softened. His tribal tattoo flickered half-seen along his forearm, as he rested his chin on a clenched fist, an unwavering sentinel guarding his throne. Silently, his wolves prowled the perimeter, taut as coiled thunder beneath the surface. Their watchful, restless presence added weight to the accusation hanging in the air. Kaelira of the Raven clan, the judge intoned, his voice brittle with long years of cold justice. You stand accused of conspiring against this kingdom. His eyes flicked to the scroll in his hand, then back to her, stealing secrets, betraying your people, and endangering the Alpha King himself. A ripple of murmurs stirred the chamber. There was hunger in those eyes, an eagerness to tear her down, to see her fall. Yet, despite the chill of the accusations, Kaelira's defiance burned warmer than any rage in the room. I deny it. Her voice rang clear without hesitation, calm and unyielding. I have committed no treason. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Even the judge blinked once, surprised by the steadiness in her tone. The court waited, breaths held like poised arrows. Usually, fear would break a woman accused falsely, but publicly, like dry leaves crushed underfoot. But Kaelira was no leaf. She was a tree, rooted by pain and survival, standing tall despite the storm. Theron's eyes narrowed slightly, the flicker of shadow in those amber depths, unreadable. The wolves shifted, muscles rippling beneath glistening fur. None growled or snapped, none advanced. Instead, for the first time, they hesitated, uncertain. The Alpha King had commanded loyalty and obedience, but her calm courage unsettled even them. Do you plead innocent because you believe yourself above the consequences? Theron's voice rumbled, low, insistent, cutting through the tension. Or is this some reckless pride, meant to provoke the court's mercy? I plead innocent because it is the truth. I stand here, not out of arrogance, but because truth is all I have left. Her words travelled like shards of ice, sharp yet honest. The real traitor roams free while I am shackled with lies. A harsh laugh escaped from one corner of the room, a courtesan with serpent's eyes and venom in her smile. Bold words for a woman with a scar traced across her face. Like a warning. What power does a whisper of a woman hold against the fury of the Alpha King's wolves? Kaelira's scar, a pale line etched along her left cheekbone, a souvenir from battles older than most remembered, it did not mark weakness. It was a map of her resilience, a testament to survival against those who thought to silence her. She met the woman's contempt with cool fire. "More power than you will ever understand," whispers fluttered like sparrows in admiration, others in disgust. The Alpha King leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, fingers steepled beneath his chin, like a predator weighing his options. "You speak boldly, for one cast from your people. The Raven clan's blood stains your hands more than you care to admit." His voice was quieter now, almost a challenge. "Why should I believe your words? Because I have nothing to gain from lies. If I were the traitor, I would have fled, not stood here to face death." Her defiance pierced the icy air, and because there will come a time when the truth must be known, even if it costs us both. The court's breath seemed to pause, the space between moments stretched taut. Even the Alpha King's wolves, a pack usually so attuned to their masters' every whim, paused in their restlessness. It was as if her unwavering gaze was a spell binding them all to a silence that spoke louder than any accusation. Suddenly, the judge's hammer slammed down. By decree of the court and the Alpha King's command, Kailira of the Raven clan is banished from these lands. Her name erased from our histories and her presence forbidden under penalty of death. The words hung heavily in the air, sharper than any blade, yet Kailira neither flinched nor pleaded. She only bowed her head once, a gesture not of submission, but of acceptance. This was not the end, it was a beginning. Asterisk, asterisk. The heavy wooden doors of the court slammed shut behind her, like the closing of a coffin lid. Every breath drawn now told of exile, and every step dragged her closer to shadows that promised nothing but darkness. The corridors beyond the court were colder, damp walls lined with rusted iron bars, and the faint stench of despair. Here was the domain where whispered rumors took root, the Alpha King's dungeons, a place where hope went to die. Kailira's hands were bound behind her back, the rough ropes biting into her delicate wrists, but the pain was nothing compared to the weight of betrayal pressing on her chest. Her long, raven black hair, loosely braided at first, had come undone along the way. Strands clung damply to the scar over her left cheekbone, which still ached faintly beneath the harsh glow of the torches. The guards dragged her forward, their grip consistently firm but not cruel. They moved silently, as if afraid to disturb the heavy stillness. The air grew colder, thick with a suffocating gloom, and Kailira's steps slowed, each breath a steady determination to withstand whatever awaited in the depths. At the heart of the dungeon, shadows shifted and coalesced like living creatures. Quiet growls rumbled low in the darkness, a protective wall beneath the surface. The Alpha King's wolves, fierce and loyal, their bodies sleek and alert, prowled the edges of the grim cell. Their eyes gleamed amber in the dim light, tracking her every movement with silent questions. A faint yearning stirred in their presence, a wariness, but also a cautious respect. From deeper within the darkness emerged a figure, a silhouette carved from shadows and authority. Theron stepped forward, the flickering torchlight catching the silver strands in his short dark hair. His amber eyes held the same intensity as before, but now they were marked with complexity. Neither pure condemnation nor simple mercy prevailed. Something darker, quieter, and more profound simmered beneath his surface. "You survived the court's verdict better than I expected," Theron said, his voice low and guarded. Kailira's gaze locked with his, steady but unreadable. "I have nothing left to fear from those who condemned me without proof." Theron's wolf pack stirred, muscles bunching beneath thick fur as they created a buffer around Kailira. The scent of wild earth and primal instinct mingled with the cold air, as protective as the heavy stones enclosing them. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, tense but impossible to ignore. It was the unease bred from forced proximity, from two worlds colliding in the shadow of mistrust. "You carry more beneath your silence than I have seen in decades," Theron murmured, stepping closer but still giving space. "Few have dared to stand so tall before my court. Fewer still have held my wolves at bay." Kaelira's lips quirked into the faintest hint of a smile, barely there, but present. "I do not seek your approval, my king, nor your trust." Not yet. For a moment, the only sounds were the distant drip of water and the muted growls. The weight between them was heavy, yet not hostile. Wounds, both old and new, lingered in the space they shared, stitching cracks in walls neither knew how to rebuild. Theron's eyes searched hers, reading courage and sorrow tangled beneath the surface. "Danger is closer than you realize," he said quietly. "And the walls of this dungeon will not keep you safe, not from what hunts us all." Kaelira's breath caught in her throat. Unseen power stirred within her, a low, simmering fire tied to ancient bloodlines, and secrets she barely understood herself. It was not just survival that had brought her here. Fate had its own designs, binding her story to the Alpha King's wolves in ways deeper than fear or betrayal. "I will not break, Theron," she said, voice steady as the shadows that hugged the stone walls. "But I will fight, quiet as the night, fierce as 1,000 wolves, until the truth is known. And the walls around your heart come crashing down." Theron's gaze flickered, the faintest crack opening in the mask of the iron-willed king. The wolves quieted, then their growls fading into stillness, as if sensing the shift, an unspoken alliance forged in the depths of the dungeon where light barely touched. In this place of darkness, under the watchful eyes of the Alpha King and his wolves, a fragile, dangerous trust took root. It was the beginning of something neither had expected, yet both would come to need. A bond forged, not by blood alone, but by silent defiance, hidden power, and the promise of redemption waiting beyond the cold walls. The dungeon breathed a heavy, damp chill that clung to Kaelia's skin as she moved cautiously along the cracked stone floor. Flickering torchlight pooled unevenly against the walls, shadows stretching long and thin like grasping fingers. Her fingers traced the rough surface, pausing where faint etchings whispered beneath layers of grime, and curved sigils, entwined with delicate vines and strange blossoms she didn't immediately recognize. Ancient markings, archaic language woven in tight loops and eyes, hidden away like secrets meant for no one but time itself. Her breath caught as she knelt, brushing away the dirt with slow reverence. The scent of something wild and untouched, a pungent mixture of earth and herbs, rose from the ground, subtle but unmistakable. A circle of dried leaves and crushed petals lay arranged beneath the symbols, the remnants of a protective ward, long faded from memory. She inhaled deeply, the aroma grounding her, the faintest flicker of warmth, stirring amid the cold stone. "Hallowed roots, silver leaf, and nightshade sparrow's breath," she muttered under her breath, the names skimming from her mind's distant archives like half-remembered lullabies. Guardians, against despair. Her fingers trembled as she reached into the pouch at her waist, pulling out the handful of herbs she had managed to scavenge before her imprisonment, dry and fragile but potent. She let them fall gently within the circle, arranging them anew alongside the faded symbols, her hands steady despite the thundering beat of her heart. Beneath her careful care, the faint touch of magic pulsed like a hidden heartbeat, low and ancient. It felt like a thread, nearly broken but still breathing, connecting her to stories she had never lived but somehow intrinsically knew. Not stories told aloud, but those whispered in the grey between night and dawn. From the edge of the cold chamber came a shuffling noise, a soft, ragged whining, that pulled her attention to a small bundle tucked beneath a broken bench. Kyla's eyes softened as she approached. There lay a wolf pup, no bigger than the span of her hand, fur matted and streaked with grime, a ragged tear staining its side. The creature's amber eyes glimmered with pain, but also a fierce flicker of stubborn life that mirrored her own. "Easy," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper as she knelt beside it. Her hands hovered for a moment, cautious and aching with longing. The pup growled, a low, wary rumble, vibrating from deep within its throat, the primal warning of a beast cornered and uncertain. Kyla's breath steadied. "I am no threat," she said softly, reaching slowly toward the wounded shoulder. "Let me help." The growl didn't abate, but the edge dulled as her fingers grazed the rough fur, her touch careful, practiced, patient. She pulled a strip of torn cloth from her sleeve and dipped it into the small container of herbal salve she'd managed to preserve, its scent sharp and alive against the dank air. The pup flinched once, but did not pull away. Her fingers worked with quiet, deliberate motions, cleaning the wound and coating it with the warming salve. As she worked, she hummed a low, lilting tune, something ancient, woven with notes as soft as the breeze, threading through forest leaves, and as steady as the steady pulse she felt beneath the herbs, circling the dungeon floor. The pup's growls softened to a series of whimpers, its breathing evening out. Its golden eyes traced her movements with something less than suspicion, hesitant flicker of trust, fragile and bright. Talia's heart stirred, a fluttering hope taking root in the cramped, shadowed space. "You are not alone," she whispered, barely believing the words, even as they left her lips. She shifted to cradle the pup in the crook of her arm, warmth radiating upward, in contrast to the cold stones pressing at her back. The wolf nuzzled her palm, the fur coarse but surprisingly tender beneath her touch. It was the smallest surrender, but it throbbed with the promise of alliance. A faint rustling echoed behind her, and she didn't twitch. The pack was near eyes keen, instincts alert, assessing every movement. But the growls she'd heard earlier were absent, now replaced by silence so utter it almost hummed. The pup's acceptance seemed to ripple outward, reaching the wolf spirits that hunted with the alpha king. From the shadows emerged a hulking figure, Theron stepping closer with measured calm. His amber eyes flared with cautious intensity as they settled on the scene before him. The small beast cradled in her hands, the fragile pulse of ancient magic stirring in the stale air. His gaze met hers with questions unspoken, a flicker of wonder brushing the stoic mask he wore so closely. "Careful with that one," Theron said softly, voice rough but not unkind. "She is the Alpha's bloodstrong, stubborn, dangerous in her own right. Few can tame such a fire with mere kindness." Kyla met his gaze steadily. "I do not intend to tame," she replied, "only to heal." A pause lingered, thick and charged, before Theron's stance relaxed, if only slightly. The wolves that had once stalked the edges of the chamber shifted closer, their golden eyes watching, waiting, sensing the shift in the current of power. In that fragile, silent accord, Kyla felt the first true tremor of belonging, not as a pawn nor prisoner, but as a force quietly weaving itself into the fabric of the Alpha King's domain. Later, as night deepened and the echoes of the court's cruelties faded into distant memory, a different energy filled the dungeon's cramped depths. Kyla sat cross-legged by a shallow alcove, her voice rising in a soft, unbroken hum that barely disturbed the stillness around her. The melody was old words forgotten, but feeling vivid, steeped in healing and hope. a song the women of her bloodline had sung through centuries of exile and pain. It carried the weight of loss, but also the promise of renewal. The notes vibrated softly against the cold stones, threading through the air with an unseen current. Her ice-grey eyes closed, letting the song flow through her, each breath a tether to something beyond the tangible. At first, the wolves stirred restlessly. Their ears twitched, growls bubbling like distant rumbles beneath the surface. The tension was palpable, a storm held just at bay. Yet none stepped forward to scold or warn her away. Instead, they shifted uneasily, the pack's collective gaze turning toward her with a mixture of wariness and intrigue. Theron appeared, then, his broad silhouette outlined against the torchlight, eyes narrowing as he caught the faint hum threading the air. His movements were silent but deliberate as he approached, standing just beyond reach, arms crossed over his wide chest. Kalira opened her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze with a steady calm. The song paused, a breath hanging between them filled with quiet challenge. "What are you doing?" Theron's voice was low, heavy with more than guarded suspicion. "This place demands strength. Control not mysticism or dreams." She smiled faintly, a shadow of defiance softening her sharp features. "It demands survival," she said, "but survival is more than muscle and teeth. It is spirit. It is power unseen by those who rely solely on force." Theron's amber eyes flickered, a mixture of confusion and something unspoken widening the depths beneath his stern exterior. "You are not like anyone I have known," he murmured, voice roughening with reluctant fascination. "This song, it stirs the pack in ways I cannot explain." The wolves, once on edge, had now settled into a kind of uneasy peace, some creeping closer still to her side, noses twitching and eyes glossy with unexpected reverence. Their growls had softened to murmurs, protectiveness folding around her like a cloak of shadowed loyalty. Kalira's heart pounded under his gaze. She recognized then the first fissure in the armor Theron wore, a crack wrought not from battle, but from the quiet bewilderment of witnessing strength, defined by something other than dominance. "I am not here to claim the pack," she said softly, standing to face him fully now. "I am here to remind us all that power takes many forms. Some are louder, some quieter, yet none are less real." Theron's silence stretched. His eyes roamed her face, down to the subtle scar, tracing her cheekbone, the resilience that radiated from her slender frame. For the first time since she had been cast into his realm, he did not see a shadow to be conquered or a prisoner to be broken. Instead, he glimpsed a kindred force, one that might bend but never break. "The pack listens to you," he finally admitted, voice low and raw with something close to awe. "And so do I, though I do not understand why." Kalira's lips curved, faint but steady. "Then listen more," she urged, "and learn. There is more to this fight than fighting, more to loyalty than blood." He stepped closer, the space between them charged but unspoken, a fragile truce formed in the depths of the dungeon's cold heart. Around them, the pack shifted in quiet praise, their fierce presence a testament to the bond quietly knitting together the Alpha King and the woman who stood tall where so many had fallen silent. In that vaulted darkness, Kaelia's quiet power pulsed like a hidden star, steady, unyielding, and full of the promise of light yet to come. The murmurs began softly at first, the fragile thread of trust woven between Kalira and Theron, stretched taut by shadows, lurking only half-glimpsed. The great hall of the Alpha King's keep, once a place of cold judgment and whispered threats, now trembled with an undercurrent of suspicion. The pack's usual low growls and shifting paws had morphed into wary glances and clipped silence. Even the air itself seemed thick with tension, as if the stones underfoot remembered the betrayal being whispered in their vaulted chambers. Theron moved with the weight of leadership pressing deeper onto his shoulders. His amber eyes, once steady and commanding, now flicked constantly to every shadow, every murmured word. The tribal tattoo along his forearm seemed to writhe beneath his skin, a visible sign of the unease gnawing at his core. The very wolves who had pledged feral allegiance to him were unsettled, restless, their bodies taut with alertness, and their gazes never quite meeting either his or Kalira's. When the whispers shifted from the outer corridors to his own court, Theron's fingers clenched into fists. The revelation was subtle but unavoidable. A traitor walked among them, someone who had orchestrated Kaelia's fall, who had spun the poisoned lies that had shattered her name and broken the fragile peace. He didn't fully grasp why his heart tightened at the thought of her, ensnared in danger once more, but instinct screamed that she was not simply collateral damage. She was a force, a stubborn flame flickering against the cold dark. And now, with venom crawling through the veins of his court, he found himself unwilling to let that flame be extinguished. He sought her out when the shadows grew longer, the rest of the pack retreating to their dens or gritting their silence in waiting. Finding her near the hearth, where the last embers burned low, her grey eyes reflecting the faint glow, Theron's voice was a low growl that shifted the quiet. Like a stone dropped into still water. Kaelira, the court, is not safe. She regarded him with a calm that refused to be intimidated. I sensed it before you spoke. The pack's unrest is louder than their words. His gaze hardened. Not just unrest, betrayal. And it's close enough to strike again. Her stare didn't waver, but her body responded in a subtle shift, stepping towards him, as if closing distance could build a shield. Then keep me close. If I am to survive here, it will not be by hiding in the shadows. The tension between them was a living thing, charged with unspoken questions and the brittle edge of mistrust. Neither fully offered trust, yet neither could bear the thought of parting. To send her away was to consign her to danger, to keep her near was to bind their fates even tighter in this fractured court. Theron's response was a single nod. The motion waited with reluctant acceptance. You stay within the inner walls. I will not lose you to treachery again. Kaelira's lips curved faintly. Neither a smile nor a surrender. Then let us both be vigilant. The pack watches, but we do not need to be watched by shadows. The wolves closest to them stiffened at this new proximity, their hackles rising and falling in unison with the quiet storm brewing between their alpha and the woman who had unsettled their king's world. Their restlessness was a mirror to the danger lurking, a reminder that the peace they had glimpsed was fragile and easily shattered. For days, Kaelira moved within a smaller circle, her steps traced by silent watchfulness. The corridors echoed with murmurs that skirted around her like a chill wind. But her resolve only deepened. She had been cast out once. Now she would claim her space, not by pleading or yielding, but by standing tall within it. Theron's presence was constant, a shadow close enough to offer protection, but distant enough to guard the fragile line between dominion and alliance. Their conversations were laced with cautious politeness, each testing the other's boundaries, but reluctant to cross them fully. Yet beneath every word, beneath every glance, the tension hummed, a tangled thread of respect, curiosity, and something unsaid that neither dared voice. One evening, as the moon cast pale light through narrow windows, Kaelira found herself drawn to the outer courtyard, where the night air was sharper and the pack's restlessness had seeped outside. Her breath formed faint clouds, the cold biting at her skin through the thin fabric of her cloak. Her fingers brushed absently over the crescent scar that traced her cheekbone, a physical reminder of past wounds, both inflicted and survived. News had reached her through whispered fragments that the betrayal was deeper than suspicion. The voices named names, veiled in shadows, hinting at conspirators, who had spun the web that ensnared her. The falsehood that had cast her into darkness was not just a cruel twist of fate, it was deliberate, a calculated strike aimed to break more than just her spirit. The weight of that knowledge hardened her resolve. The fragile ember of defiance within was now a steady fire. If the court saw her as broken, they were mistaken. If they believed she could be silenced, they misjudged the steel beneath the quiet. Her steps led to the kennel, where a wounded wolf lay huddled against the cold stone. The creature's fur was mottled with dirt and blood, eyes glassy but flickering with life. The wolf's pain was palpable, raw as the ache in her own heart. Kneeling beside it, Kaelira's hands moved with gentle certainty, her touch steady, as she sought to ease the beast's suffering. "It's all right," she murmured softly, the husky timbre of her voice blending with the night's hush. The wolf trembled beneath her, a wild force tempered only by the kindness she offered. "You aren't alone." Bandaging torn flesh with strips of cloth torn from her cloak, Kaelia felt an unexpected surge of connection, the kind of bond that transcended words or bloodlines. This wolf was a symbol turned tangible of her own journey, wounded but alive, fierce yet healing. Outside the door, a low growl shattered the fragile calm. Theron's beast, the shadow that lived entwined with the Alpha King's soul, paused in the hallway, nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of change. Restless, unsettled, the wolf paced in quiet frustration, sensing the shift in Kaelira's spirit. The courts had seen her as a broken woman, a shadow, to be crushed beneath the weight of power, but something about her now stirred unease, even in the ancient beast. Kaela looked toward the door, the faint glow of the moon illuminating her uneasily steady gaze. She felt Theron's presence like a pulse beyond the threshold, not quite near, yet impossible to ignore. The tension between them, fragile but unyielding, wove through the air. She knew that their fragile truce was more than a shield, it was a beginning. The pack might have fallen silent in her presence before, but now the quiet was pregnant with promise. And as the wounded wolf beneath her leaned weakly against her side, and Theron's restless beast growled a low warning beyond the door, Kaelira stood taller than ever. Not because she claimed dominion over the pack, nor because she conquered her enemies in battle, but because she had found strength in quiet defiance and power in healing the fractures left by betrayal. The night stretched on, thick with cold and whispered danger, but in that stillness, something unspoken passed between the Alpha King's wolves and the woman who dared to stand among them. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and veiled threats, yet Kaelira's quiet fire burned steady, an ember refusing to be extinguished, a light yet to come. The low rumble of hurried footsteps echoed through the ancient stone corridors beneath the court, a dark omen against the steady drip of water from unseen cracks. Kalia stood as still as the shadows, her breath measured but alert, the faint light from a flickering brazier casting wavering patterns on the cold walls. Though her heart pounded fierce beneath her ribs, she held herself with that same quiet strength she had cultivated like armor, an immovable force forged from years of betrayal and hardship. But the shift in the oppressive silence was sudden and violent, harbinger to rupture the fragile calm she and Theron had so delicately stitched together. From the gloom ahead, figures sprang forward, blades drawn, faces masked in cruel intent. The air became taut with the metallic scent of steel. Assassins. They moved with lethal precision, cutting through the shadows like living poison, their intent clear. Chaos and death in the depths of the king's domain. The court's suspicion had turned into outright menace. Walls that had once whispered cold judgments now moaned under the weight of imminent bloodshed. Instinct ignited within Kaelira and Theron simultaneously. A silent, wordless signal passed between them, the embers of their shaky alliance flaring into fierce solidarity. Despite the maelstrom around them, Theron's amber eyes, their intensity sharpened, like cut obsidian locked on hers. His broad frame shifted forward, muscles coiling beneath dark fabric and tribal ink, a living weapon born for war. Beside him, Kaelira's slender silhouette moved with an unexpected fluidity that was both grace. The subtle scar on her cheek tightened as her jaw clenched, the quiet fierceness in her ice-grey eyes hardening into a primal readiness. The first assassin lunged, cold steel aimed reflexively at Theron's exposed side, but Kaelira was swifter. Her hand swept out. A steel dagger sheathed at her hip flashed and caught the attacker's wrist with a snap that cracked like thunder. The man stuttered, shock wasting his momentum, buying Theron the fraction of a breath he needed to strike. Theron's fist connected with brutal precision, sending the assassin crashing against the damp stone, the sickening crunch echoing off the walls. Yet no time lingered for triumph. More came, swarming like black tide. Kaelira's movements were a storm unleashed quick, precise, and intricate. Her slender form dodged a slash, twisted beneath a wild blow, and retaliated with sharp strikes that sliced through leather and sinew. Her hands were deadly. Every breath she took was a silent promise of survival, not just for herself, but for those she'd come to protect. The pack, the wolves who once stood silent in her presence, were now fighting beside her, snarling and snapping, coordinated and fierce under Theron's command. Theron's respect, long simmering beneath his stoic exterior, surged with each moment in battle. This woman, whose silence he had once mistaken for weakness, stood resolute, like the ancient mountain around them, unyielding and indomitable. And, more than that, she shielded his wolves as fiercely as if they were her own flesh and blood. When a blade aimed for one of the younger fighters drew near, Kaelira intercepted, twisting the assassin's wrist, forcing the weapon away, her fingers tightening until a harsh cry rent the air. "Kaelira?" Theron's voice was a low growl, filled with urgency. There was no doubt, lingering in its timbre. He was acknowledging something profound in her resolve. She spared him a glance, fierce and unrepentant. "They will not harm your pack. Not while I breathe this air." A pulse of something raw passed between them. In that instant, something vital. Something that burned away the lingering shadows of mistrust stacked between them. Taura's loyalty was no longer a matter of whispered conjecture. It was a storm of steel and blood witnessed by those who mattered most. And Theron's burden, the weight of the Alpha King's mantle, began to shift as he allowed himself to recognize a kindred force beside him. They fought as one, predator and wolf, king and exile, until the last assassin lay defeated among the broken remnants of their cold dungeon refuge. The only sound left was the ragged breathing of survivors and the dripping water that resumed its relentless fall. As Theron leaned against the rough stone wall, his gaze fixed on Kaelira, the tension that had gripped him slowly loosened, replaced by something quieter but no less potent. She did not speak immediately, the rapid beat of her heart slowly settling beneath calm resolve. When she finally met his eyes, there was no need for words, only the mutual understanding that this battle had been more than a matter of survival. It had been a revelation. Actress later, when the first faint flush of dawn began to stain the horizon beyond the prison's thick walls, Theron stood apart, brooding in the shadowed recesses of his private chambers. The flickering candlelight cast long silhouettes across his strong frame, tribal tattoo seeming to pulse with a life of its own beneath his skin. He had watched Kaelia in the aftermath, The way she moved among the pack, a subtle shift in demeanor that unsettled the very foundation of his long-held prejudices. She was tending to the wounded wolves with a delicate touch that surprised him, the same hand that wielded a dagger, now carefully bandaged. Torn flesh whispered calming words that hushed shivers of pain. It was a tenderness he had never expected from her, a softness beneath the fierce exterior, one that comforted and healed in equal measure. Theron's gaze flicked to the youngest wolf, who, miraculously, had survived the night's violence, pressing against Kalira with quiet trust as she stroked its dark fur with fingers that trembled only ever so slightly. The vulnerability she allowed, the small freedoms she took within his ordered realm, these were fractures in the walls of his command that he did not dare dismantle for fear of what might slip through. Yet, something inside him stirred, unearthed by the simple truth of watching her care for his pack as though they were extensions of herself. He felt the faint thaw of the beast behind his amber eyes, the growl subdued and twilight tempered by respect. A cautious step brought Theron closer, though he remained draped in the shadows, observing without disturbing the fragile intimacy. His voice, when it came, was low and raw, with a mixture of wonder and wariness. "You move among them as if you belong." Kalira's head lifted, ice-grey eyes meeting his, not with defiance this time, but with a tentative offer of truce. "I do belong," she replied quietly. "Not by right, perhaps, but by choice. They need me, and in turn, I find strength in them." A silence stretched, seeded with unspoken truths and the slow weaving of trust. Theron's gaze softened imperceptibly, his hand brushing against the nearest war-torn bandage on his forearm, as if recalling his own scars were made lighter by her presence. "Strength is not given freely in my court," he said, the weight of his burden thick in his words, "and loyalty costs more than blood. You have paid well." Her smile was faint, fragile yet radiant with an inner fire. "Then I will pay again for them, for you." The words lingered, a fragile covenant forming amid the ruins of suspicion and the ashes of silence. Theron stepped from the shadows, the faint silver in his hair, catching the morning light, a king who, for once, allowed himself the grace of vulnerability. "Come," he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "Show me then the woman who stands tall not because she claims the throne, but because she guards what matters beneath it, in that quiet chamber." The walls that once seemed impregnable began to crumble, revealing two figures bound by more than circumstance, their fractured pasts merging into a tentative future. Kalira offered her hand, steady despite the tremor of hope that surged beneath her skin. Theron, hesitating only a heartbeat, took it. The warmth of their touch, a fragile bridge spanning the chasm of mistrust. For a moment, the court and the pack fell silent once more, not with fear or suspicion, but with an unexpected reverence. Here, in the soft dawn, something unspoken blossomed, a fragile trust, a tentative beginning. It was not the end of their trials, nor a declaration of dominion, but a promise, a whispered vow beneath the rising sun, that together they might forge a new path through shadow and flame. Kalira's ice-grey eyes met his amber ones, steady and fierce, yet gleaming with the faintest trace of a smile. Despite all the mysteries and dangers that awaited beyond these stone walls, in this small moment, they were no longer adversaries or foes cast into uneasy truce. They were a union of strength and silence, two wounded souls learning to trust the light emerging from the depths of night. The ancient library lay hidden behind a tapestry that billowed faintly with the draught seeping through aged stone. Kalira's fingers trembled as she pushed aside the heavy fabric, uncovering a narrow, spiraling stairway carved from rock itself. The scent of must and forgotten secrets curled around her. Dust motes dancing in the stray shafts of light that leaked between the cracks above. Every step deeper into that cryptic hollow felt like a descent into the buried heart of the castle's soul, where time had layered stories in thick volumes bound with cracked leather and embossed glyphs. She paused before a fallen book, its spine broken, but its pages pristine beneath a sheen of dim dust. The cover bore an emblem unfamiliar, yet hauntingly evocative, a wolf, entwined with a tree whose branches twisted into stars. Her breath caught against her ribs, a slow burn of recognition igniting inside her chest. Her fingers brushed the fragile parchment, peeling it open to reveal a script, both ancient and strangely alive, curling across the pages like living vines. The words wrapped around her mind, speaking of a prophecy born long before the Alpha King's blood was spilled on battlefields or forged in stone halls. It whispered of a bloodline destined to rise, not from conquest, but from unity, a bond between wolf and woman, shadow and light, of a daughter, born beneath the moon's cold gaze, a child of silence and fire, who would break the boundaries of pack and throne alike. Kalira's heart thundered, steady and fierce. The subtle scar along her cheek stung, as though the past itself remembered the truth she had yet to live. The prophecy hinted beyond whispered betrayals and court intrigues. It spoke to something old and relentless rising within her, a power hidden beneath her delicate exterior, the calling of identity that had always hummed beneath the surface of her awareness. She straightened, clutching the book tightly, feeling the weight of history settle onto her shoulders. The fragile hope trembling at her fingertips now grew to iron determination. Whatever the cost, she would not be the pawn, cast aside, or the accused wronged. Within her was a flame no whispered secret or wounded heart could extinguish. Out in the hall, the court resumed its restless breathing, whispers curling like smoke around the high stone pillars, sharp eyes scanning, hunting for weakness to exploit. Yet Kalira met their gaze with a quiet fire that simmered beneath her calm. Her ice-grey eyes no longer shimmered with uncertainty, they burned with an unshakable resolve. But it was not only the court that stirred. Beyond the cramped stone corridors, in the shadowed forest, beyond the castle walls, Theron's wolves grew restless. Deep in their dens, their amber eyes glimmered raw with an unease not born from instinct alone, but from the shifting tide of what was to come. Their noses twitched, catching the scent of destiny as it bled through the air, something primal, something ancient. Awake once more, Theron paced the edge of his chambers, the weight of his pack's gaze settling like a mantle upon him. He sensed the currents bending toward a storm, the delicate balance of power twitching in the threads binding court and clan. When Kalira returned, their meeting was brief, yet charged. "I found something," she said, voice low but steady, pressing the ancient tome into his palms. A sacred trust passed between them. Not everything in this castle belongs to the Alpha King or his ancestors. Some truths have waited for me, for you, to understand. Theron's amber eyes darkened, a fire igniting in their depths. Then, the past is not dead, and the future is no longer a path I walk alone. Kalira nodded, the faintest smile teasing her hardened features. Together, we move forward through the shadows. Outside, the wolves let out a chorus, a longing, a warning, a promise, while the court's eyes shifted, haunted by the invisible shift beneath their feet. Asterisk, asterisk. The morning sun cast sharp beams through the stained glass, flakes of ruby, emerald, and sapphire scattering wild colours across the polished stones of the throne room, gastring. The air was thick with tension. Every breath, a fragile thread pulled taut by suspicion and concealed malice. Kalira stood at the heart of the chamber, a solitary figure framed by the grandeur and cruelty of the court, that never forgot to remind her of her place. Today, like many days before, was a gauntlet of veiled threats and sharp tongues. The murmurs swelled ever louder, feeding on the fragile rumors beginning to crumble the old order. Rivals masked in smiles, but gleaming with barbs, circled her like wolves sensing weakness. Yet, Kailira's presence was unyielding, her posture a quiet declaration that she would not be broken. It was then that the accusations came, as they so often did. A prominent lord, pale and insistent, stepped forward from the assembly. His tone was polished, but dripping with contempt. She parades here as one worthy of trust, yet her lineage remains a mystery. What manner of claim has she to this place, save for the whispered conspiracies of treason and delusion? How can the court place faith in a shadow, a ghost from forgotten blood? The eyes of the court flickered sharply, some nodding, others biting back comments with clenched teeth. A ripple of doubt wove through the gathering. Kailira's pulse threatened to betray her calm, but her voice, when she spoke, was a silken thread of steel. "Faith is earned, not inherited," she said softly, eyes sweeping over those who sought to condemn her. "The truth of my bloodline shall reveal itself not by your suspicion, but by my actions." Theron's sharp gaze cut through the chamber. His broad form stepped forward with deliberate weight. The hum of the court dimmed beneath the rising tide of his authority. Where once he might have allowed rumors to fester, today he would make an unequivocal stand. Enough. His voice rolled through the hall, low and commanding, the kind that brooked no argument. "The woman who stands before you is under my protection. Any who would harm her or sow poison against her name will do so at the peril of my pack." A sudden, palpable shift rippled through the air. The heavy wooden doors thudded open, and one by one, Theron's wolves entered. Massive creatures, with muscles taut beneath thick fur, eyes flickering, feral intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. They formed a living perimeter around Kailira, bodies taut and poised like carved statues of wrath and defense. The court held its breath. Whispers died on the tongues of even the boldest, for the sound of primal growls and the electric charge of raw power filled the chamber with a silence deeper than any courtroom decree. Theron's amber eyes locked with Kalia's, a silent conversation passing between them, one of trust and ferocity, of union and sovereignty. His voice dropped to a rumble, meant only for her. "Today, the wolves stand, not as shadows to your presence, but as your shield. Let every doubt, and every blade behind breath, know this. She is mine, and mine alone to guard." The court reeled under the weight of the statement, the abrupt power shift stirring tremors far beyond the stone walls. It was more than protection. It was a silent revolution, etched in muscle and tooth. Those who had believed themselves untouchable found themselves caught within seeing something raw and elemental, a clear warning that the era of subtle manipulation might have reached its end. One elder noble, usually the first to speak venom, faltered beneath the gaze of the pack's alpha and his chosen. What madness is this? The court cannot be ruled by beasts." Theron's voice sharpened. "These beasts are the vanguard of my will, and you will learn respect if you wish to continue breathing beneath this roof." The atmosphere thickened with a tension so palpable, it tasted like iron on the tongue. Some lords and ladies averted their eyes, sensing that a reckoning had begun. Others clenched fists so tightly their knuckles blanched, pride fighting the dawning awareness that power was no longer the exclusive dominion of whispered schemes. Kailira stood tall within the circle of claws and shadow. The weight of the ancient book felt like a secret armor beneath her arms, its prophecy a living tide swelling in her veins. She understood then that the wolves were not just guardians of flesh and bone, but heralds of a truth long withheld, a promise that the future could no longer belong to fear alone. The flicker of fear and respect in the eyes around her stirred a cold satisfaction, but it was tempered by something more profound, a promise kept in the forge of fire and ice. The court might fall silent now, but its heart beat differently. The Alpha King's wolves had fallen quiet once, but now their growl was a song of warning, a lullaby to the new dawn, and through it all, Kalira's gaze never faltered. She was no longer simply defending her place, she was claiming it, forged from the fierce light of destiny and the fierce love, bound to a king and his pack. The battle lines were drawn, and the games of court could twist all they wished, but the Age of Shadows was ending. Kalira breathed deeply, feeling the power rise inside her, a deep-rooted strength, unshaken by accusation or fear. Theron's presence beside her was the steady drum to the wild howl of her awakening. Each wolf's growl, a pulse chain with her own heartbeat, the rhythm of a queen reborn, ready to stand tall, no matter the cost. Together they wove their silence into a roar that would carry beyond stone walls, beyond whispered lies, into the fierce blaze of a dawn no one could silence. The court breathed in the hush that followed Kalira's resolute declaration, as if the very stones themselves absorbed the fierce fire she had kindled within their midst. The murmurs, once a steady undercurrent of suspicion, now shook with uncertainty and fragile hope, stirred by truth, laid bare beneath the kingdom's indifferent sun. She stepped forward, the scar on her cheek catching the flicker of torchlight, a map of pain etched into a defiant story. Her voice, when it came, was steady and measured, but each word carried the weight of 1,000 shattered silences. "This court has heard enough lies cloaked as truth," Kalira began, eyes scanning the gathered faces, her ice-grey gaze chilly and unwavering. "I stand here accused, not by shadows, but by shadows made flesh. Those who betrayed me did so with hands stained in treachery, and I will no longer let their deceit remain concealed beneath the veneer of loyalty." Her fingers curled ever so slightly at her sides, like the gathering tempest before the storm's release. "Please, listen carefully now. Listen with more than your ears. Listen with the eyes that have been blinded by fear and the hearts too quick to judge." She exhaled slowly, drawing strength as memories of betrayals past tried to claw their way through her composure. "The true traitor," Kalira's voice sharpened, "is not the one who stands accused, but the one who plotted in silence to break this kingdom from within. The one who poisoned the king's council and nearly bled this realm dry in his absence." Her gaze, locked with those of unseen watchers, cloaked in shadow, the idea of invisible enemies suddenly made tangible. A ripple of shock stirred the air as she revealed the name. The one the court had trusted implicitly, whose hidden hand had turned knife and venom against the heart of the realm. Gasps and whispered denials flickered like wildfire, but Kalira pressed on, unwavering. "I have proof," she said, voice ringing out like steel against stone, a shard of truth, a remnant left carelessly beneath the guise of loyalty. It lies in the records no one dared to examine for too long, in the faintest signature of betrayal. I lived through it, marked by their deceit, but I also survived it. And now, this court must reckon with what it has allowed. Whispers cracked into shouts as the court erupted into cacophony, accusations flying like sparks from a fire. Theron's amber eyes narrowed, absorbing the tides of disbelief and the tremors of doubt that swelled with every word she spoke. His body was a pillar of commanding presence amidst the chaos, but Kalira's revelation unsettled even his iron-willed pack. Here was the woman who had weathered exile, who bore scars carved by betrayal, standing more formidable than ever, not as a mere pawn, but as a chess master in her own right, He had never expected such a blaze of truth from her quiet flame. Her courage, raw and undeniable, sent flickers of awe through him, mingled with a prickling sense of caution. To trust was to risk, to believe was to stand vulnerable. And yet, beneath the tumult, her words carved fissures into the fragile foundation of his realm, making the king question not just his enemies, but those who stood closest. When silence fell again, heavy and uncertain, like the calm after a storm's fray, Theron's voice broke through, low and deliberate. "Calira, your strength is unlike any I have known," he said, stepping beside her, the broad lines of his face softening with a new and deeper respect. "Nor does it undo the damage wrought by deceit. We must unravel this truth together, or it will tear apart us all." The court's murmurs turned watchful, the initial shock settling into wary anticipation. Though their faith now wavered, the king's acceptance of her words cast a protective cloak over Calira, one that promised at least a fighting chance against the darkness threatening to overwhelm them. And so, amid the murmurs and wary glances, she stood tall, a living testament to resilience and rising hope. The day's revelations had changed everything. The court was no longer a place of silent accusation, but an arena of uneasy reckoning. Night waned, and the castle's halls emptied of their watchful courtsmen and whispering nobles. The flicker of torchlight danced in sharp contrast to the chilling stone walls, where shadows pooled and memories hung heavy like a cloak. Theron moved silently through the corridors, each step purposeful yet laced with hesitation. The distance between king and court was vast, but the distance between king and Calira had somehow grown even more complex. He found her at last, in the least forgotten corner of the keep, the dungeon's quiet heart, where silence pressed in like the cold stone itself. Here, beneath the weight of history and stone, the truth spoken earlier felt distant, fragile against the dark. Theron's broad shoulder brushed the rough wall as he stopped, just short of her presence, the quietness between them stretching tenuously, a fragile thread bound by circumstance and unspoken emotion. She looked up, surprise flickering in her sharp eyes, veiled by flickering torchlight. The fierce queening court softened here, in this shadowed sanctuary where the armor of public battle fell away, revealing not just survival, but vulnerability beneath the scars. "Why do you come here?" she asked softly, voice stripped of defiance, edged with something unguarded. He stepped forward, eyes no longer glinting with the fierce command expected of a king, but warm amber pools swirling with the weight of tired battles and silent regrets. "Because the throne is as lonely as the dungeon," he said softly, voice low. "And I find sometimes the only truth is shared in places no one else dares to enter." Calira's gaze flickered toward the beast resting at her feet, a great shadow of muscle and sinew, the Alpha King's wolf, silent and watchful. It shifted slightly, sensing the shifting tides between its master and the woman who had come to hold his spirit as tightly as the realm itself. Theron knelt then, the gesture shedding the last veneer of royal distance. His hand touched her scar lightly, reverent as if tracing stories untold. "You bear more than just wounds from the past," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. "You carry the weight of this kingdom's fears and betrayals. Yet, you stand here not broken, but unyielding. I see now, truly see, what you've endured and what you might still bear." Calira's breath caught, the fortress she'd built around her heart trembling in response. "I never asked for this burden," she whispered, "but I will carry it if it brings justice, if it protects those who cannot stand." Theron's hand lingered. A bridge of quiet understanding between two souls battered by storms. "And you will not carry it alone," he vowed, voice steady, "for the pack stands with you as I do. We are all marked by our scars, some visible, some hidden, but in acknowledging them, we find strength together." A fragile smile touched her lips, the first in what felt like a lifetime, brief but luminous. "Then perhaps we both have new battles ahead," Calera said, voice threading hope with wariness. "Battles not just for survival, but for the honor that has been so grievously tarnished." Theron nodded, the ember-like fire in his gaze sharpening. "And with you by my side, Calera, I fear no darkness this kingdom might face." The wolf at her feet rose slowly, shifting closer, an unspoken guardian of this newfound alliance. In the heavy stillness of the dungeon, warmed by the fragile embers of trust and unspoken promises, the king and the queen, bound by shared scars and shattered truths, found a rare peace. There was no need for grand proclamations here, only the quiet power of presence, the steady drum of two hearts beating in cautious tandem beneath grim stone walls. For the first time, the silent watch of the Alpha King's beast felt less like a warning and more like a blessing, a subtle herald of change and the fierce promise of a dawn fought for, not with violence alone, but with fire. Calera lifted her eyes to meet Theron's. The resonance between them, a whispered vow unheard by all but the quiet night. The past might have sculpted their wounds, but together they would sculpt a future neither would dare face alone. In the refuge of shadowed stone, the queen and her king shared a solemn moment of fragile hope, an unspoken vow that whatever storms might come, they would face them side by side, fierce and unyielding. And, somewhere beyond the dungeon's quiet depths, the kingdom waited for healing, for justice, and for the fierce light of two souls reborn beneath the weight of prophecy and pain. Calera knelt beside the fallen beast, the massive form of the Alpha King's fiercest protector, its midnight black fur matted with blood and grime. The great wolf had returned from the hunt, a sacred ritual of strength and survival, but tonight the predator was wounded, deep lacerations along its flank, spoken of violence far beyond the usual contest. The air around them was thick and heavy, the scent of earth and iron, sharp beneath the pale glow of torchlight. Theron's voice, steady yet tinged with a rare vulnerability, broke the silence. "Calera, it's not often I ask for aid, but this I need you." His amber eyes caught hers, shimmering with the weight of a silent confession. She nodded, brushing a stray lock of raven hair behind her ear, the subtle scar on her cheek pulsing faintly beneath her touch. The wolf regarded her warily at first, nostrils flaring, muscles taut, like coiled steel, yet beneath its fierce exterior there was a fissure of suffering that no pack law or warrior's pride could mask. Calera extended her hands, the chill of the air seeming to waver as an unseen pulse rippled through her fingertips. The energy had whispered to her in moments of despair and solitude, soft and secret, a flame flickering beneath frozen ground. Now, in the somber quiet of this chamber, it surged unbidden, wild and tender. She laid her hands upon the wolf's side, palms warming against the ragged wounds, and the animal's tense body began to settle beneath her touch. Theron watched, breath caught between disbelief and awe, as the deep crimson stains faded under her steady palms. A gentle light bloomed beneath her skin, like the first shimmer of dawn, spilling through storm clouds. The wolf's eyes, once narrowed and fierce, softened, widening in silent surrender. Muscles that had trembled with pain slowly relaxed, breath uneven but calm. What had been lethal agony gave way to soothing balm, an ancient magic woven into Calera's very being, sharp and urgent as the truth she'd long concealed. "It bends to you," Theron murmured, voice rough, laden with every gruff ounce of his alpha resolve, and burgeoning wonder. None, like you. She pulled back slightly, still feeling the echo of power thrumming beneath her fingertips. The wolf, now a shadow of its former fury, tempered and faithful. Its great head dipped once in quiet reverence, a silent pact renewed beneath the stone ceiling, lined with flickering light and murmurs of old oaths. A connection forged, not by dominance, but by trust and the shared pulse of life. And yet, she whispered, her voice fragile but fierce, it is not command. It is recognition of what must be healed, of what is broken yet still whole. Theron's gaze never left her face, the smooth lines of determination and gentle strength anchoring him in a way no crown or battle could. For once, the great wall of the Alpha King trembled, momentarily breached by a fragile, undeniable something, trust, perhaps, or the first petals of wonder that might bloom into something irrevocable. Near the wounded wolf, a subtle shift rippled through the pack's air, the unspoken hierarchies softening beneath the quiet power Caelira brought, and it felt as if the kingdom itself was holding its breath, awaiting the dawn. Then, as if summoned by fate's cruel hand, the room's ancient stones seemed to hush, the shadows folding inward to reveal a truth long veiled, and one that would change everything. A parchment, brittle with age and hidden far beneath the castle's vaults, was produced. It bore the hereditary seal of the Alpha King's bloodline, yet it told a story that even Theron had not dared to whisper. The inked lines wove a revelation tangled and profound. Caelira's own lineage, cast out and whispered of in frightened tales, was bound irrevocably to Theron's. They were not merely allies, shaped by circumstance, but kin by blood. By fate, their souls tangled across generations, a lineage fractured and hidden in the shadows of courtly treachery. Theron's amber eyes darkened with shock, the tribal tattoo along his forearm seeming to pulse with recognition as he traced the lineage with trembling fingers. Caelira, his voice held a mixture of reverence and disbelief, the weight of this intertwined destiny pressing down with relentless gravity. We are bound by blood, not by chance, but by the blood of our ancestors. The realization rippled through them, an electric charge of understanding that shifted their entire existence. Power, loyalty, and destiny no longer stood as separate pillars, but merged into a singular, unbreakable bond, the truth of which laid bare every carefully concealed secret the court had fought to bury. This was a reckoning. It was a reckoning that demanded alliance, that refused division. Caelira's gaze softened, yet strengthened. The bruise of betrayal in her past, eclipsed by the newfound gravity of their shared purpose. This changes everything, she said quietly. The darkness that sought to tear us apart, it only wove us closer. Theron nodded slowly, a fierce fire lighting his features. We face the court's shadows as one now. No longer hunted, no longer divided. Our strength is multiplied by blood, by bond, by the wolf and the queen, together, under the dim torchlight that flickered like the pulse of a heart set to defiance. They summoned the pack, and the remnants of the court loyal to truth and justice. The great hall, filled with restless whispers, morphed into rallying cries as the wolves, once subdued by fear and suspicion, rose with new purpose, a chorus of howls that echoed through the stone corridors, a fierce hymn of unity and rebirth. We stand at the edge of a new dawn, Theron declared, his voice soaring above the gathered assembly, resonant with authority, forged not just from lineage, but from hard-won trust. The time of shadows ends here. Together, we will root out the treachery that festers within our walls. Together, we will bind this kingdom, not as master and servant, but as brother and sister, as mate and alpha, as queen and king. Caelira stepped beside him, her slender form radiating quiet strength, the scar on her cheek a testament not to weakness but to survival and fierce refusal. "From exile and pain, our strength grows," she said, voice steady and clear. "We will fight, not only with sword and claw, but with the fire that comes from truth and love. Our place is not given, it is earned by every battle, every sacrifice." Their words stitched together the frayed threads of loyalty, weaving the court and pack into a tapestry of renewed allegiance. The wolves' howls, deep, mournful, then, rising into triumph, felt like the heartbeat of the kingdom itself, a pulse no longer restrained by fear, but lifted by hope and unshakable resolve. When the night's chorus finally settled, Theron turned to Kalira, his presence immense, yet tempered with a tenderness reserved only for her. The shadows of the past, the betrayals, the scars, the silent battles, fell away before the fierce clarity of this moment. There was no throne to claim, no script to follow. There was only a promise, forged in quiet storms and blazing light. "I offer you more than alliance," he said, voice low and steady, the amber glow in his eyes not of command, but of choice. "Not a pawn, arranged by the court's cruel hands, but a mate, chosen by heart and battle, equal in strength and voice. You stand beside me, not behind." Kalira met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words settle, like warm stone, in the hollow places where fear had lived. She had never sought power for its own sake, but here, standing in the raw truth of their bond, she recognized something deeper, a sanctuary born, not of silence, but of shared strength and fierce trust. "I stand with you," she answered, her voice a whisper, yet ringing with fierce conviction. "As your equal, as your mate." The wolves, watchful and loyal, closed the circle around them, their ranks united not merely by the king's command, but by the undeniable force of the love and power intertwining these two wounded souls. In the hush that fell, beneath watchful amber eyes and tethered fate, two broken hearts began to heal, strengthened by fire, tempered by trust. Together they stepped forward, their presence, a promise and a warning bound by blood, by choice, and by the fierce, unyielding light